call to order the December 20th Policy Committee meeting. It's a little after 1 o'clock. In attendance, we have Ms. Edwards, Mr. Sullivan, and Mr. Campbell. Birch and Flynn may or may not show up. We'll make a note if they do. Craig, can you go through the public involvement announcement, please?
Yes, all of our AMATS meetings are public meetings. The public is invited to comment on the topics. If we have a business item, we'll have a presentation either by staff or a consultant, and then the committee will be given an opportunity to discuss it, and at that point, the public will be given an opportunity to comment.
Okay, thank you. We have before us today's agenda. Do anybody within the committee here have corrections, modifications proposed to the agenda? Seeing none. I guess
the
we'll-
agenda?
Second?
Any objections? No objections. The agenda is approved as presented. We have minutes for 3 different meetings. March 22nd.
Move to approve the March 22nd minutes.
Second.
Seconded.
Actually, I don't believe I can second since I,
You can.
You don't have to have been present to approve and vote on minutes.
okay, very good.
Any objection to these minutes as presented? None, thank you. Approved. October 25th are our next set of minutes.
I move to approve the
Second.
October 25th minutes.
Moved and seconded. Any objection to those? None, thank you. November 15th minutes.
I move to approve the November 15th minutes.
And before I second, well, I'll second, and then
Okay,
under the members present, it lists neither myself nor Mr. Vacalis, and I thought one or the other or both of us actually were here at that one. I thought I came late. I think it was a very quick meeting, if I recall, but,
I will verify that and add the correct person.
okay, thanks.
gee, that was all last month.
I know, I don't remember. Somebody was here.
More of those moments as my days go by. Okay, so without objection, then we'll approve these pending the correction for the attendance. Thank you. We have 4 business items. Mr. Lyon, are you going to take the lead on these things?
I will do that.
Starting with letter A, I guess.
Letter A, which is the conformity determination for our TIP Major Amendment number 4. It's just that, in that we've had this amendment out for a while. This was the conformity determination that was done for it, showing, in layman's terms, it conforms. So we always need to approve the conformity first before we actually approve the amendment, so we can make sure that it does conform. So that item is before you first.
Okay, do we have any public comments? Mr. Morris, anything to say about this?
Just that it did go through interagency consultation as required, and there were no objections to the conformity determination.
Probably very little comment in general, I'm guessing.
Very little comment on this, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Any motions?
I move to approve the conformity determination for major amendment number 4 of the AMATS 2010-2013 TIP.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion from the committee members on this?
Urge approval.
Thank you. Ms. Edwards?
And for
Any objection to this as presented? Seeing none, that is approved. This is item B.
Item B, this is the actual amendment. You folks have seen this at least a couple of times. There are a couple of changes that I need to mention from the last time you saw it. One is at the Technical Advisory Committee meeting, there was a move to add some additional funding into bicycle plan project implementation, which is in Table 4 of the TIP. The Public Transportation Department had applied for and received a couple of different federal grants, and because of that, they were able to suggest offsetting some of the money that we had in our allocation. So the Technical Advisory Committee voted to add $1.3 million total in additional funds into the bike plan implementation again, offset by those grant monies. So in other words, we were able to move some money over there in addition to keeping all the other projects in the tip whole. So we didn't delay any road projects or CMAQ projects, et cetera. And the CMAQ projects that were in there for transit that they got grant funding were still kept whole. So that is one change that got made. In addition, at the last Technical Advisory Committee meeting, Mr. Welburn at Transit also asked to add a couple of projects into Table 8 of the TIP. These are other grants that Transit has applied for. And if you look in Table 8, they're the last two projects in the TIP, or in that table, Project 27 and 28. Right now, they show funding in 2014. Those are the grants that they have requested. In other words, if they're successful in those grant applications, then these monies will be shown in there. If they don't get it, I'm assuming they'll apply for it again, but it may not necessarily show up in 2014. So those aren't live numbers right now because the grant process is not finalized yet. But if we add them now, then when the money comes in, it's a relatively simple, if they have to move it in 2013 or something, it's a relatively simple process to add that money. If we don't have these projects in there, it's a major amendment to add them in. So the idea was piggyback on it here now, in this major amendment process. So if they do get success, if they are successful in their attempts to get those grants, we don't have to take 6 months to add those projects, which are essentially earmarks, into our Table 8. Okay. Those are the changes between the last time you saw it and now. So, happy to answer questions, but urge approval.
Sure.
Yeah, on the bike plan implementation, Craig, you'd mentioned that when we were briefed on the upcoming meeting that possibly Lori or somebody had a list of what roads might be. Is it in our packet?
You should have behind your proposed bike project 2013. Should be behind that. There you go. You got it right there. Yep. So this is a list of proposed bicycle projects, and again, we had, I think, $500,000 originally in design early money. I think that was in 2011, and then in 13 and 14, we have those additional hits of 2.3 million total. It was 100,000 originally, sorry, in 2011, and then an additional 1.3 in 13 and 14 for the construction parts of it, and maybe some design. So depending on how far you can get down that list and how far those numbers come out, these are the proposed bicycle, mostly signing stuff on our list in our approved bike plan.
What table were you just looking at?
Table 4 is where you'll find all the transportation alternative stuff.
If I could ask one more question, Mr. Chairman. So, as you know, Mr. Line inquired about where funding might come from for the Port of Anchorage, knowing that money had been earmarked for the port through this process, and that we've been informed that all of the money has been mixed into this giant pool, and if we were going to find money, that we would find it from areas within this universe. And so it seems to me this could be some of the money that would be within that universe, rather than expanding the plan, which already has significant funding. As you know, I'm interested in finding funding for what was designated by the congressman for the Port of Anchorage. So as I look at the amount of money already in the bike plan, I'm compelled to think that I probably wouldn't be supportive of moving monies that I think would be directed to the most important infrastructure asset in the state of Alaska.
Thank you. Any other comments here? I'm going to go to the public here in just a minute, but if we've got any preliminary comments, anybody else want to make any other general statements? Members of the public, does anybody have any particular comments or testimony they'd like to give on the TIP amendment number 4 as presented? Yes, sir.
Hello, thank you. My name is Todd Logan. I'm a longtime Anchorage resident, a regular cyclist, and today also representing bicycle commuters of Anchorage as a volunteer. I spoke before this group, I think 3 months ago, and expressed some dismay and disappointment at the original proposed allocation in the TIP amendment for bike plan implementation. As you know, I think the bike plan passed unanimously by the Assembly in 2010, and really has had very limited implementation since then. We're not lost that some of the nice road projects we've had done, which are important to everybody, have included some great bike and pedestrian infrastructure. And two of the biggest road projects in the current TIP, while extremely expensive, are important for both motorists and also include bike and pedestrian infrastructure. And we very much appreciate that. That said, the low-hanging fruit in the bike plan is the striping signage of core bike routes on existing asphalt. The revised numbers that are presented before you today, $2.3 million, was very much in part a response to public comment and extensive public comment during this process. And I want to thank the Technical Advisory Committee for being responsive to such comment. And Mr. Lyon could certainly tell you more about what occurred that led the TAC to change those numbers. I very much appreciate the importance of the port and other things, but at this point in time, I encourage you to hold the course and provide what we actually believe is a modest but certainly important funding for the bike plan at the level $2.3 million. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody have any questions or comments for our testifier? Cross-examiner?
Yeah. What kind of bike do you have?
It's downstairs.
Anybody else from the public sector care to comment on the plan before us? Do we have a motion before we continue our discussion? Would somebody like to propose some action other than a motion? Please.
I'll make a motion to approve, I'm trying to remember what we're looking for in the action. I'll do for you. We move to approve the 2010-2013 TIP major amendment number 4.
Second. Seconded. Okay, now let's have some discussion on this. I assume that somebody, well, actually, can I ask a couple of questions, Craig, of you first? Can you describe the process that this TIP amendment has gone through to get to our desk here today? Not infinite detail, but I think there's been 3 or 4 other bodies that have reviewed this, approved it. Have they modified it? What's been the process today?
So it was released for 30-day public review. During that public review, we received about 125 or so comments from the public asking us to, the only comments that we had were the ones that were asking us to increase funding for the bicycle and ped plan. It went to the AMATS Bike and Ped Advisory Committee, where they supported that idea. It went to the Planning and Zoning Commission. They had no changes to the document. They were aware of the bike plan, the additional funding that was approved at the technical committee, as I mentioned earlier. It went to the Assembly. They had no changes to the document. They approved it, I believe it was 10-1 was the vote. And that's so far the whole process that we've gone through.
Okay.
Without
So several advisors have seen this and approved it as before us here. And my other question is this, we have established guidelines within our funding categories. Does this additional $1 million into the enhancements program, or whatever we're calling it, keep us within our policy committee guidelines for percentage of spending?
Our policy and procedures say between 10 and 15% averaged in the transportation alternatives category over the 4-year lifespan of the TIP, and we're at 12%.
For the 4-year?
The 4-year average. I think we were at 11%.
With this money
before.
in budget
With
as
this
proposed,
additional.
we're at 12%?
Yes.
Those are my questions. Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, thank you. I'm quite comfortable with the current proposal of $500,000 in 13 and $850,000 in 14. That's $1.35 million for primarily striking roads. And we're automatically striking roads as we build new roads in the community. So to add another $2.3 million over 2 years, I think is going beyond the need. And again, I supported the bike plan, don't get me wrong, I just feel like when we're prioritizing very, very scarce money, which is going to get even more scarce, and you've got a way, as I mentioned at the start, finding every source of funding that we can allocate, particularly when money was designated specifically for the Port of Anchorage that, to, I guess, redirect monies towards something that is not as high a priority, I think is a mistake.
Mr. Birch?
Just to apologize for being late. I wasn't on my bike and couldn't find a parking place for my car. Regarding the, I mean, most, as the mayor's indicated, most of what we're looking at here is striping, basically reconfiguring the paved surface. What, you know, we also have separate bike paths. Is there kind of an emphasis towards, you know, towards moving bikes onto the paved road surface and getting away from bike paths? I mean, I always thought that the preference was to have, if you had a road and you had a parallel bike path, that the preference was getting the bike traffic onto the bike path and out of the, I'm just in general.
Well, I'll give you my sense of it, and maybe Lori can add if need be, but the bike plan, what they had the thing called the Bike Compatibility Index, and what they did was, I mean, people want to ride their bikes if they're commuting, as opposed to, you know, if you're doing recreational biking. Most of the time, the recreational trails are not the most direct route. So adding bike lanes on the existing roadways, those are more of a direct route. And so this Bike Compatibility Index measured several things. One was, you know, how much right-of-way is available if you wanted to put a bike lane in next to you, next to the travel lane. They also looked at the speed of the traffic. I mean, there's enough room on the Seward Highway to add bike lanes, but most people probably would not feel comfortable riding their bike next to 65-mile-an-hour speed. So this index looked at all of those things together and then identified which locations in Anchorage would be compatible with adding just a bike lane. You know, striping on the pavement is a lot less expensive than adding an actual separated pathway next to it. So that's part of what the bike plan was looking at, was what's the low-hanging fruit, what's the easiest thing to do to add some bicycle facilities, and rotomilling in some stripes there that will last, you know, more than just one season is one of them.
So if you're looking at, if I might continue, if you're looking down C Street, for example, and you have a parallel bike path, would you double up on that, put a bike lane in as well? I mean, do you have a bike path and a bike lane in the roadway?
Maybe let me let Lori give details.
I'm just,
It's one of the ones proposed,
Yeah.
Street 36.
yeah, and that's, you know, we spend a lot of money on bike paths, and I guess I struggle with the idea of kind of, you know, doubling up, but maybe you could speak to that.
Certainly. AASHTO has done some recent studies, and actually, if you are an adult and you're using your bicycle as a utility for transportation, the safest place to be is on the street. I know in the last year, we keep hearing of people that are on the side paths, and when cars are coming out to a corner, the right hook on red, or the right hook, like if you're driving and you're turning right, you're always looking left, and that's when collisions with cyclists happen. So it's been proven that being on the roadway is a safer place to be. You're seen, you're traveling the same direction, and so that's why we're striping bike lanes. Now, C Street is a great example because there's already a shoulder that runs all along C Street, so people do use the shoulder. It's kind of a paved shoulder bikeway, as well as the side path. We also don't encourage people to use the road, like especially children, if they're not able. We try and get people to bike where they feel best. I teach bicycle safety, and that's what we teach people, to bike on the road. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it just seems like a redundant, you know, because I know there's a lot of money invested in the bike path, and then
The side paths,
kind of
yeah.
doubling up with a.
You know, there's a lot of people walking out there too, and having things separated is great for street maintenance too, because they have a place to put the snow. And it's just a safer place for people to walk. So I hate calling them bike paths, but because bicycles are allowed on the road. But in summary, it's just safer for bicyclists.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion, Ms. Edwards? Anything?
I had a question, just so I understand. When the technical committee moved money into this 1.3 million, is that right? Into the bicycle pedestrian, it came from which category funds was it in origin? What did we move to get that money?
What we had was funding that was in Table 5, the CMAC category, in two different projects. Project number 1, and again, you'll see in that table, you'll see SIP mandated projects, studies and plans, programs. If you go down to projects, you have transit fleet expansion and replacement, and project number 2, transit centers and facilities. Those were the two areas where the Public Transportation Department was able to get some grants, and so the money came out of those two categories. Those two projects, I should say. Because they had grant funding to offset the AMATS allocation.
I'm going to ask a couple more questions, just since we seem to be charging you here today, Craig. If we were to approve this as before us today, what type of process would it take for us to change the numbers in these categories in the future? I mean, my understanding in a layman's terms is that once we have a project identified, it's not a major amendment to change funding within that project. If, for example, a month from now, we decided that the 2014 number was too high at 2.4 million and we wanted to lower it to 1 million, would that require a major amendment, or would that be a policy committee decision within the bounds of our current scope of the modifications to this document?
I believe that's administrative modification, yeah. So it would not be the major amendment process of
It would not be
30-day
a
public review and
6-month
all that
process.
stuff. Yeah,
to-
yeah.
And similarly, if we were to, I believe we are going forward with project scoping and scoring after the start of the year, aren't we, for the next year go
Yes.
around? So, for example, at that point in time, that would be an opportunity for the mayor's work projects to be scored competitively in the process to see where they may fall within the ranking categories for future funding.
Right.
Question.
Sure.
Just to follow. On, you mentioned that the additional, was it 1.7 million comes out of the transit fleet expansion?
The combination of that project and the transit centers and facilities.
Okay. And I guess to the mayor's point on the fungible nature of these dollars, so do I understand then that, that these dollars could actually be reassigned to another project, or but it seems like we're at 10 to 15% guidelines as far as expenditures for the alternative, but we're kind of on the low end of that right now.
Yeah, let me just grab my policies and procedures here. I can't remember the exact number of what we put into CMAC as well. But again, these are policies and procedures. These are not
Right.
federal rules, but we say 55 to 65% to roadways, 15 to 20% to pavement replacement, 10 to 15% to what was transportation enhancements, and 10% to CMAC. Those are the guidelines that we have when we try to build this TIP.
Okay.
So all of the AMATS allocation can be used in those three categories: the roadways, the TE, or transportation enhancements now, or transportation alternatives, or CMAC. And they're all able to move around.
Great, thanks.
Well, I think we've got a process in front of us in the next 6 months where we're going to be scoring and ranking new projects. And I guess I'm going to recommend that we adopt this document as it's gone through the public process, as it's gone through the review process of various agencies within this municipality. It's been approved by those bodies. I'm going to suggest that we approve it today, and if we need to, as a committee, reevaluate our spending percentages in the future, I think that's a fair question to ask, whether we think 10 to 15% is appropriate. We can certainly address that on a policy level, and I think that would give, for example, the TAC guidance in their shaping of the nominations and projects for the next go-around under nominations. So my recommendation would be that we move forward with this document as presented and take on the policy issues in upcoming meetings if it's so desired to do so.
And,
Yes, Mayor.
yeah, and I don't disagree with the policy decision as far as what a range is. I just think that the lower range for something that isn't as high a priority as others is probably more appropriate.
So is there any more discussion? We've got a motion and a second in front of us. Does anybody have any additional comments they'd like to make on this? I guess I'll ask for a show of hands or whatever. All those in favor of passing the motion in front of us, which Mr. Flynn is to adopt the TIP Amendment 4 as displayed in this document in front of you.
Adopt or release for public comment.
Adopt. It's been through the public process, so those in favor of approving as shown? 1, 2, 3. Mr. Flynn, care not to vote?
I actually, because I just got here, I prefer to stay on this one, thank you.
Okay. 3 opposed, Mr. Mayor? Motion passes 3-1 with 1 abstention. That brings us, I believe, to agenda item E, D?
Right, Steve?
C?
C, UPWP, our work program. So, you've at least seen this before. This is our planning funds for next year for AMATS staff. Also includes some for your DOT staff. Some funds to the health department staff for their air quality work. This has gone through the technical advisory committee. We had a couple of work sessions on this to work the numbers, to figure out what the plan is. We, as you know, the budget that was passed removes one of the positions in the AMATS group, and so we are going to allocate some of the funds to long-range planning staff in the same community development department to shoulder some of the workload, because the workload is the same, it's just we don't have quite as many staff to do that. So we do have the funds for it, so we'll be able to utilize some of the expertise in the long-range planning staff to do that. But this is the budget that was worked out, and again, it went through the technical advisory committee. It's the same dollar figure as last year, just some stuff's been changed around a little bit in terms of priorities. I also have the work program here, which is that looking document, and we updated some of the tasks in there to reflect the work needing to be done on performance measures that came out of MAP 21. And in addition, there were a few tasks that we had in the original budget here, in the original program that was adopted in 2011, that due to the change in staffing, we're not going to do. We had a street typology map we were going to work on, and we're not going to have the, basically the staffing available to do that. So we removed that task from the project here. But here it is before you, and the TAC recommended approval. Happy to answer questions.
I'm sure there'll be a few, but let's start with the public sector first. Anybody have any questions or comments for Mr. Lyon on the annual budget element of the UPW? Can't believe there's not more interest in this. Committee.
Road.
I'm not sure we're interested, no. We are great, we really are. Thank you.
I have a question, actually.
Great, thank you.
On task 360, moves implementation,
Yes.
it looks like that's one of the ones we removed, except we still have revenue over in the grant revenue on the grant side of the ledger of 5,000. Is that just a typo?
Those are EPA grant funds to the health department. Mr. Morris, if you have is that a typo, or did we miss
That should be
that?
stricken. Yeah,
Okay, that should be stricken, all right. We didn't catch that.
It's okay.
We had money in there previously to have Steve and his group get all trained up on that project, that process, so.
So I have a couple of comments, Craig, if I think there's a gap here. I guess a couple things are on this large 8.5 by 11 colored sheet that we've got, in a general sense, the red items are things that have changed, is that true?
The red items in the dollar figures are things that have changed. The red items here in the description, the actual task, those were just new from the previous 10 and 11 UPWP. So I just left those in red because those were new from the previous time. But the dollar
So it's
figures
a
that are in red.
two-year plan and a one-year budget.
Right.
And the stuff in the red on the far left is part of the change to the two-year plan. The stuff in red on the right side is to the one-year budget.
That's correct.
Okay. And in the general sense, the stuff in red here in the written document is also stuff that has either changed in the last 1 year or 2 years.
The stuff in red in this document, those should be things that have changed from when this was originally adopted in November of 2011. So those are just the recent changes that I put in here
Okay.
related to the TAC's suggestions, et cetera.
Good question.
I have a couple too, yeah, go ahead.
On 249, the UMed district plan, and I'm just trying to understand the relationship. We just approved a TORA for northern access to
UMed Northern Access.
UMed Northern Access. And could you give me just a thumbnail sketch of how that integrates with the UMed district plan?
Well, the UMed district,
I want to hear that too.
Well,
oh, wait a
yeah.
minute. The UMed district plan is a planning effort that is being updated. It's being updated by the long-range planning group in the Community Development Department. So the dollar figures that are in here are work that's being done by the Transportation Planning section to assist their efforts. Obviously, that UMed area is right where that northern access is, and so they're two separate efforts. There's the TOR that you just approved related to what's going to happen with that northern access, and then the UMed plan that's already being worked on, where I'm sure there will be much discussion on that topic, but it's not the main focus of that plan, I've been told. This money in here is just transportation planning's efforts to assist long-range planning. They're the ones managing that project.
Well, remind me what the TORA was for.
That's project specific as opposed to neighborhood general.
But it's actually for a specific project, right?
Right.
Yes.
Which is going to have pretty significant, it's going to be a game changer in that area. I'm just trying to understand how the kind of the sequencing here of doing the planning after if you got basically a major project there.
Well, I guess it's the UMed plan takes all of the UMed area
Okay.
into account and everything that goes into that, and obviously one portion of it will be that northern access. I mean, that's a huge part of it, but.
A huge and wonderful addition to the community out there.
Good editorial, Mr. Bush.
So.
Good thing you represent South Side.
It made it a lot easier to get to the north side.
I think to add a little bit to your questions, Mr. Birch, is that we are negotiating right now. The TORA was to give the state of Alaska that money that had been legislatively given to the city.
Right.
And we are working on an agreement right now between the city and the state to discuss these very issues, the timing of this plan relative to the project, and how those things are going to fit together. Because that's clearly one of our concerns too, is that to precede a plan with a project seems kind of
Ass backwards.
presumptuous in a way, but we are trying to work together to get to a common ground of understanding there before we start going too far down the path.
Yeah, no,
Well, and to that, I mean, we're building roads every day. We have an East District plan being done. It doesn't mean we're not going to build roads in East
Right.
Anchorage while the plan's being done. So they get incorporated. And this might be a little off topic, but maybe you can shed some guidance on that northern access road. There's a price tag of about $20 million on it, and it includes extensive right-of-way purchase, but it's a state road on state land. I mean, we own the university. Is that standard that the state buys land from itself in order?
Let me tell you the story of the bike trail just about a block south of there.
We pay dearly to the university when we take their land, yes. we
Is
do.
it because they're a land grant university and any land they have has to be accounted for separately?
I think that's, in a nutshell, it, yes. They have a very single focus on their land ownership. So,
Mr. Mayor, prior to your tenure on this body, we had a deal with the university to get a little chunk of land for the bike ped trail that connects into the network into the university, from the network into the university. And Chancellor Ulmer had worked out what we thought was a very reasonable price for it and got overruled by some Range 10 clerk up in Fairbanks at UA. And we paid 10 times what it was worth to get that little piece of trail and to benefit the university.
that exclusively benefited the university.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was
Sorry,
great.
I didn't mean to get us off track there, Mr. Chairman.
Not that I have strong feelings on the matter.
Yeah, not sensitive to it at all. So, Mr. Lyon, I have one more question. The three things in red here, I guess the top three things, two of them are plans which apparently have no funding associated with them. So was the change, both the street topology, I think you said that was gonna go away, but then the Government Hill neighborhood plan says new task, and I think $0 across there. Is that because we're taking money out of that plan, that's what's new, or is it?
It's done.
Okay, so
completed?
in the task, where you see all the tasks there, the red means this was new from our 10
Right.
and 11
So the plan is
UPWs.
completed, is that?
So in that case, in the Government Hill plan,
Okay.
that one has been adopted by the Anchorage Assembly.
Okay.
No, it hasn't. Or, I'm sorry, it's been adopted by P and Z,
Yeah, it
but
hasn't
our
come to us
work
yet.
on it is finished.
Okay, great, that's good.
And the street typology map, that one hadn't begun, but just due to staffing levels, we won't be working on it in 2013.
Okay, great.
Whether we'll get to it in the 14 or 15 timeframe, who knows? Still an important thing, we think, but we just don't have staff to take care of it now.
Okay, any more comments on this? Questions? We have a
Move to approve 5C, the Unified Planning Work Program.
second. Been moved and seconded. Any objections to the documents presented? Seeing none. Approved. We're on to item D, the limited maintenance plan for CO.
Yes, it's gone through all the possible committees, I think so, with the exception of the Assembly, who is they're the ones who get to have the final say on that.
We've had adequate public notice, I assume?
What's that?
We've had adequate public notice?
I believe we have had significant and adequate public notice.
You know?
At the AMATS Air Quality Advisory Committee, there were some suggested changes which are on the back page of the whole document in blue. The TAC listened to those changes and made some modifications to it, and that's what the language is here. It's related to the monitoring sites. Originally, I think we had 4, and we're committing to, I believe, 2 now. A city this size are required by the EPA to have 1, but we're committing to 2. So anyway, there was some language that was added at the Air Quality Committee, and the TAC tweaked it a little bit, and here's the result. And so we're asking for today the Policy Committee to bless this as well, and it will then go on to the Assembly for final adoption. So I'm sure Mr. Morris could answer any other questions we might have, but that's where we're at.
Okay, well, let's see if anybody has anything from the public to say on this. Does anyone have any general comments they'd like to make or questions? No, committee members, any comments or questions for Mr. Morris or anybody else?
I've got a couple, actually.
Mr. Flynn?
First off, where does it say we're committing to 2?
Say that again?
Where does it say we're committing to 2 sites?
Here, that page in blue.
Well, we will operate monitoring sites in compliance with EPA monitoring guidelines, obviously the 2.
It's on,
Station.
I think that the area that was actually addressed by the Air Quality Advisory Committee is on page 12-4. I'm sorry, 12-3.
Okay, sure.
It says monitoring network verification of continuing attainment. And one of the things that the Air Quality Advisory Committee wanted to do is indicate that there was an emphasis on continuing monitoring at a neighborhood in Spinard that we call the Turnigan Station, because that measures the highest levels. And there was some discussion about that. We wanted to make sure that doesn't imply a commitment to be there forever, because we're there basically, it's a private church that we're monitoring at. They could kick us out tomorrow, and we would not be able to continue there. So we tried to do, we brought it forward to the TAC. There's a footnote there that makes it clear that there's no commitment to continue monitoring in any one location. That's certainly our intent, to measure the highest levels that we can, and turning in site reflects that. But if things go south, we don't have any say there. So EPA knows there's no implication that there's a commitment, absolute commitment.
Okay, I understand it, but I mean, Mr. Lyon informed us that we're committing to monitoring at 2 sites, even if we're not saying which sites.
It's actually we needed to modify the monitoring portion of this LMP, take out the specific commitment that says the number, and it's now says that we will meet the commitment to monitor,
In
but
compliance
not
with
the
monitoring.
number that we need to monitor.
Okay, so the number's out entirely.
That's correct.
Okay, that's what I was looking for, and I couldn't find it, so, all right, that helps, thank you. And given that we are gonna apparently continue at 2 sites, Turnigan is 1, what's the other one?
Garden.
Garden? Okay, thank you.
And Turnigan apparently is iffy because Mr. Lyon says the church is up for sale, so if you don't have any church buyers.
Which church is it?
The one right next to
Unitarian
Turnigan.
Oh, it's Lutheran Methodist.
It's a Unitarian church on Turnigan and 30th.
Yeah, I don't have any church flyers in my family.
Sure, that's off our mission.
All I know is that I informed Mr. Lyon we're 2 blocks away from the highest concentration site that we measure.
That's a good straight, that's a good straight line, Mr. Mayor, but I'm not gonna take it.
Okay, gentlemen, ladies, do we have any other relevant comments on the CO maintenance plan?
Just one, just a technical correction on the sheet that we got, it's listed as 5E, and it's on the agenda 5D, so just a technical.
Okay, so noted. Could I get a motion?
Move to approve.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion or comments?
I'd just like to thank the air quality team. You guys are doing great work getting this program right-sized for our community. I know it's been a Herculean effort, so thank you so very much.
I'll second that. I appreciate that effort as well. Any objections to this moving forward to the assembly as presented? Seeing none, that is also approved then. Do we have any informational reports today, Mr. Ryan?
No, sir. I do have these 2 signature pages I'll send around for the tip, so.
The things that we've just approved here today,
Yes.
signatures for transmittal.
There's a conformity document, and then the second one is the tip itself.
Thank you. Mr. Birch, can you talk and write at the same time? Do you have any comments that you'd like to
I
make?
do not. I just wish everyone a very Merry Christmas and a warm holiday season.
Sounds like the guy with the plane ticket.
I wish. I got my mother-in-law coming to town.
Warm, different kind of warm. Yeah. Mr. Flynn. Any comments?
I'm gonna try to top that, Mr. Chairman. I'll just say I apologize for my tardiness. I had a conflicting appointment today.
Thank you. Ms. Edwards, any comments?
Just wanted to wish everybody a happy holidays and also to thank everybody, especially the staff and the committees for working on the CO limited maintenance plan. I agree that this is a good step forward for the community for this plant, so appreciate everybody's work on that.
Mr. Mayor?
Thank you. Just a couple of things as we go forward, just for informational purposes, Chairman Hall of the Assembly and myself have met with many of the folks on the Spenard Road project, and it looks like we have some begrudging consensus moving forward. It's listed in our sheet as 2016, and we may want to look at, as we get into the next year and reallocate things, that might be ready for a little quicker action there. The road is deteriorating, and it looks like we have a bit of a go-ahead, so.
Would you care to illuminate us as to the configuration that road might look like?
It's going to be 6 lanes.
Divided median?
Underground. Couple bike lane in the middle.
Second day. Okay, we'll stand by.
No, thank you. Happy holidays.
I don't believe I have any further comments for the committee here. I remind us that our next meeting is on the 10th of January, or the next technical committee meeting is on the 10th. Our policy committee meeting is on the 24th. Thanks to staff for all the good work they've done this year. I think we've had a pretty productive year as a committee too. So I want to thank all you for your help and participation this year. We're adjourned until next year.